A pilot with no ammunition faced a choice measured in seconds. This happened under procedures documented in Fleet Air Defense Bulletins archived at the Naval History and Heritage Command, during operations governed by standing orders for combat air patrol rotations above Okinawa's radar picket stations. The mechanism was routine, fighters launched in pairs, vectored by radio to intercept coordinates, expected to return on schedule. This isn't fiction. This is what happened when routine collided with the one variable no standing order could predict. What a man does when the arithmetic runs out. April 1945. Okinawa. The United States Navy faced the most sustained aerial assault in its history. Nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties across 10 massive attacks called kikusui, floating chrysanthemum. The name sounded delicate. The reality was not. Picket destroyers stationed 60 miles north of the invasion fleet absorbed most of the strikes. Behind them, cruisers formed the screen protecting the carriers. The system worked through layers: long-range radar detection, fighter interception far from the fleet, anti-aircraft batteries as backup. Each layer assumed the others would hold. That assumption held until it didn't. Picture yourself in the cockpit of an F-6F Hellcat on the afternoon of April 16th. You've been airborne for an hour and 40 minutes. Your section leader went down 30 minutes ago. Engine failure, ditched near a destroyer, probably picked up. You're alone on station now, vectored north by a tinny voice through your headset. The voice gives you a bearing. Bogies inbound, multiple contacts. You bank hard, pushing the throttle forward, and the Pratt & Whitney engine responds with its familiar roar. Below you, the sea is gray-green and wrinkled. Above you, clouds stack in layers, cover for an attacker if he's patient. The war had taught you this. Kamikaze pilots didn't dogfight. They dodged, they scattered when intercepted, dove for the wave tops, used clouds, used the sun. If you missed your first pass, they'd be gone into the scatter, and some of them would get through. The math was simple and brutal. You carried enough ammunition for about 20 seconds of sustained fire. After that, you became a fast, empty observer. You see him before the voice calls it. A lone zero, lower than expected, trailing smoke from his cowling, already hit, probably, by another fighter or by flak from one of the pickets. He's skimming low, maybe 200 feet, heading southeast. Toward the fleet, you roll into a dive, line him up, press the trigger, the Browning's hammer, tracers arc out. You see strikes, wing root, fuselage, but he doesn't go down. The smoke thickens, but he holds his course. You pull up, circle, dive again. Second burst. More strikes. His aileron tears loose, flutters away. Still he flies. Third pass. You squeeze the trigger and the guns stutter, cough, stop. Empty. All six. The sound of wind and engine replaces the gun. Noise. You're still diving, closing fast, and below you the zero wobbles but doesn't turn. He's committed. Beyond him, maybe 6 miles out, you see the gray shape of a cruiser. Not a destroyer, bigger, longer. You know the profile. Cleveland class maybe, or one of the heavy cruisers. Doesn't matter which. Matters that she's there, and he's heading straight for her, and you have no ammunition, and the voice in your headset is saying something you don't process because you're already making the calculation. Distance, speed, angle. You could break off, report the bogey, hope the cruiser's guns get him. Hope. You've seen what hope looks like when a kamikaze gets through. You've seen the USS Laffey take 6 hits in 80 minutes and somehow stay afloat. You've seen the Newcomb, the Emmons, the Calhoun go down. You know the numbers. 5,000 American sailors dead at Okinawa, more than any other battle. You know what one bomb-laden zero does to a cruiser's superstructure. The decision isn't a decision, it's arithmetic. One plane, one pilot. Yours against one plane, one pilot, one bomb, and 400 men on that cruiser. You push the stick forward, full dive. The Hellcat accelerates, the zero fills your windscreen. You're not aiming for him, you're becoming the weapon. The last thing you see clearly is the meatball on his wing, the red circle against white, and then impact. Records from the Okinawa campaign, preserved at the National Archives, document 26 ships sunk by kamikaze attacks and more than 200 damaged. Fighter pilots flying combat air patrol logged intercept after intercept, and ammunition expenditure reports show the constant shortage. Hellcats and Corsairs returned to their carriers or land bases empty, having fired everything in 60-second bursts. What the records don't capture, what no after-action report fully describes, is the moment when standard procedures fail and something else takes over. Let's go back. Zoom in on the days before. April 11, 1945. The carrier USS Essex rode at anchor in formation with Task Force 58, 50 miles south of Okinawa. Below decks in the ready room, pilots gathered for the evening briefing. Fighter Squadron 83. The squadron had been in combat since February. Strikes on Tokyo, Iwo Jima, then Okinawa. They'd lost 7 pilots in 2 months. 3 to anti-aircraft fire, 2 to operational accidents, 1 to a mid-air collision during a scramble, 1 to a kamikaze that clipped his wing during an intercept. The survivors sat in folding chairs, flight suits unzipped in the heat, and listened to the intelligence officer describe what was coming. Kikusui No. 7 would launch in the next 48 hours. Maybe 300 aircraft. The intelligence was good. Radio intercepts, reconnaissance photos of airfields on Kyushu showing increased activity. The pattern had been established over the previous attacks. The Japanese launched in waves, broke into small groups to saturate the combat air patrol, use darkness and weather as cover. Some got through. Always, some got through. The squadron's newest pilot sat in the back row. Call him Lieutenant Thomas Whitaker, though squadron records list only Lieutenant T. Whitaker, VF-83 in the sortie logs, and his service file remains incomplete. He'd arrived in March, flew his first combat mission on April 1st, the day the invasion began. 23 years old, trained in Florida on exhausted peacetime procedures, then rushed west as replacements were needed. He'd logged enough flight hours to be competent, not enough to be confident. In training, they'd taught him gunnery, angles, lead, deflection. They'd taught him formation flying, navigation, carrier landings. No one taught him what to do when the guns went empty and the target kept coming. The pattern of those days: dawn launch, 4 plane divisions rotating on station above the Picket destroyers. Each station had a designation: Picket Station 1 through 16, arrayed in a ring 60 miles out from the main fleet. Station 1, the northernmost, saw the most action. Station 16, to the south, saw the least. The destroyers below carried the latest radar, the longest range sets that could pick up incoming raids at 70 miles. When the radar lit up, the destroyer radioed the fighters. The fighters went to meet them. On April 16th, Whitaker flew his 9th combat mission. Morning launch, 0530 hours, paired with Lieutenant Commander James Caldwell, section leader, an experienced pilot with 30 missions and 3 confirmed kills. Their assignment, Station 3. Relief for the dawn patrol, 4-hour rotation. The flight out took 20 minutes. Below them, the destroyer at Station 3, the USS Kimberly, steamed in slow circles, her wake a white curl on gray water. They checked in by radio, received acknowledgement, began their patrol pattern. Racetrack ovals at 8,000 feet, visibility good, scattered clouds at 12,000. The first hour passed without incident. Caldwell's voice came through the headset occasionally. Calm, procedural. Check fuel, check oil pressure, check your 6. Whitaker responded, matched his flight path to Caldwell's, tried to ignore the knot in his stomach that appeared every time he flew over water this far from the carrier. At 0715, the Kimberly's radar picked up contacts. Bearing 340, range 50 miles, multiple bogies. Caldwell acknowledged, turned north, Whitaker following. They climbed to 10,000, leveled out, scanned the horizon. The intercept came at 0732. 6 aircraft. Zeeks and Vals, mixed formation. They scattered when they saw the Hellcats. Caldwell called his target, rolled into a diving attack. Whitaker picked another, followed it down. The Zero snap-rolled left, dove for the deck. Whitaker stayed with him, closed to 400 yards, fired. Short burst, saw strikes. The Zero's canopy shattered. It nosed over, hit the water, disappeared. His first kill. No time to feel it. He pulled up, searched for Caldwell, found him a mile east, chasing another Zero. 3 more aircraft scattered north. 1 was already burning, trailing smoke, losing altitude. Whitaker keyed his mic, called it in, turned to pursue. That one he hit twice. Solid strikes both times. It should have gone down, didn't. The pilot held course southeast now, low and straight, heading for the fleet. On the third pass, Whitaker's guns went dry. The Hellcat carried 1,800 rounds total across 6 wing-mounted Browning machine guns. Standard doctrine called for burst fire, 1 to 3 seconds per trigger pull. Longer than that, you wasted ammunition. Shorter, you missed. Whitaker had fired within doctrine, 1 burst on the first kill, 2 bursts on the second target. But the second target kept flying, and he'd fired a third burst, then a fourth. Math: 1,800 rounds at roughly 800 rounds per minute equals about 15 seconds of total fire time. He'd used it all. Now he had speed, altitude, and a plane with empty guns. The kamikaze below him didn't know that. Couldn't know. The Japanese pilot was focused on one thing: the target. Records suggest kamikaze pilots received minimal tactical training after late 1944, enough to take off, navigate to the target area, identify a ship, dive. No evasive maneuvers, no complex tactics, just point and commit. Whitaker could have radioed the cruiser, could have broken off, returned to the Essex, refueled and rearmed, been back on station in 90 minutes, could have trusted the cruiser's anti-aircraft batteries to handle it, should have. According to standing orders, a pilot with expended ammunition was to return to base immediately. Remaining on station without weapons served no tactical purpose. The orders made sense. They were written by people who had never watched a kamikaze bore in on a ship full of men who couldn't outrun a 200-knot dive. Later, after the war, a historian reviewing Pacific air combat would write, this appears in a U.S. Naval Institute press publication from 1972, that in the chaos of the Okinawa campaign, pilots sometimes disregarded written orders in favor of what they called situational command, meaning do what the situation demands, not what the manual says. The historian noted this as evidence of flexibility. He did not note that such flexibility usually meant someone died to buy someone else time. Whitaker radioed Caldwell. 3 words. Going in. Ram. Caldwell's response is not recorded. Radio logs from the Kimberly note only heavy static intermittent transmission during the 0730 to 0800 window. Whether Caldwell heard, whether he responded, whether he tried to order Whitaker to break off, none of that survived the static or the moment. The dive took 12 seconds. The Hellcat, fully loaded, weighed 9 tons. At terminal velocity in a powered dive, it could exceed 400 knots. The Zero weighed 2 tons, was already damaged, flying level at low altitude. The physics were straightforward, the outcome certain. Impact occurred at approximately 0743, 6 miles north of the cruiser. Witnesses on the cruiser's deck, this from the ship's deck log, archived separately, reported seeing 2 aircraft collide at low altitude, northern bearing, both aircraft falling into sea. No parachutes observed, no survivors recovered. The cruiser continued her patrol. The destroyer Kimberly dispatched a small boat to the impact site, found debris, wing sections, fabric, unidentifiable metal fragments. One body, partially intact, wearing a U.S. Navy flight suit, retrieved, identified through dog tags, Lieutenant Thomas Whitaker, 02-3847. His personal effects were sent to his family in Ohio. A letter, standard form, explained he died in combat operations near Okinawa, that he served with distinction, that his sacrifice ensured the safety of others. The letter did not explain how, did not mention the kamikaze, did not describe the choice. Those details lived in mission reports filed by squadron commanders, in Caldwell's handwritten account submitted 3 days later in the Kimberly's decklog entry. Caldwell wrote, Lieutenant Whitaker expended ammunition engaging 2 enemy aircraft. Second aircraft remained operational, heading toward fleet units. Lieutenant Whitaker initiated ramming attack without further communication. Believe enemy aircraft destroyed. Lieutenant Whitaker observed to crash simultaneously. No shoot. 62 words, flat, factual. The tone suggested he'd written many such reports. Perhaps he had. What the reports don't capture, the sound in the cockpit before impact, the engine roar, the wind screaming through the dive, the absence of gunfire, the knowledge that in 12 seconds, 11, 10, it ends, not abstract, not theoretical, ends, And this, the kamikaze pilot also knew. He must have seen in his mirror or his peripheral vision the Hellcat diving. Must have understood in the last seconds that he wouldn't reach the target, that another pilot had made the same calculation, the same commitment, 2 men, 2 planes, same ocean. The afternoon after the collision, VF-83 held a brief service on the Essex's hangar deck, standard procedure. The chaplain read from the service manual. The squadron commander spoke. Someone folded a flag. The men stood at attention, then returned to the ready room for the next briefing. That evening, another kikusui was expected. More missions would fly. Caldwell flew twice more that day. On the second sortie, he shot down a Naval attempting to attack a destroyer. On the third, he ran out of ammunition chasing a Zero and returned to base per orders. He noted in his post-flight report, expended all ammo, broke contact, RTB, standard procedure, by the book. War runs on procedure until procedure fails. Then it runs on something else. Call it instinct. Call it training that goes deeper than manuals. Call it whatever lets you sleep afterward, or doesn't. Consider what Whitaker knew in those 12 seconds. He knew the cruiser's crew didn't know he was there, didn't know a kamikaze was 6 miles out, closing. And he knew the cruiser's radar might not pick up a single low-flying aircraft in time. He knew that even if it did, even if the 5-inch guns opened up, the kamikaze might get through. The statistics said some always got through. He knew that if the Zero hit the cruiser's bridge, the captain dies, the executive officer dies, maybe the whole command staff. If it hit amidships, it could penetrate to the magazines. If the bomb detonated inside, and they usually did, the delay fuses giving them time to punch through before exploding, the ship might go down. Might. Or might survive with 100 men dead, 200 wounded, and a hole the repair crews would spend weeks patching while the ship limped back to Pearl Harbor or San Francisco. All of that, he knew. What he couldn't know, whether his ramming would work, whether hitting a Zero at 400 knots would destroy it or just knock it off course, whether it would detonate the bomb, whether the impact would kill him instantly or leave him conscious as the plane broke apart and the ocean came up. He knew that too, actually. He knew he probably wouldn't survive. Ramming wasn't a tactic. It was a last act. And he knew that the Zero's pilot, call him Flight Petty Officer Takeshi Yamada, though his name too is lost, another blank in the record, had made a similar choice days or weeks earlier, had volunteered or been assigned or been pressured into the Special Attack Corps, had climbed into that Zero knowing he would not return, had flown south from Kyushu, probably in formation, probably accompanied by other kamikazes and maybe some escort fighters, had seen the American ships appear on the horizon, had picked his target and begun his dive. 2 pilots, 2 commitments, 1 collision, the cruiser steamed on. Her crew never knew how close they came. The deck log notes nothing unusual for that hour. Routine patrol, Condition 2 anti-aircraft readiness, no hostile contacts. The radio man who logged the entry had no idea that 6 miles north, 2 aircraft were falling into the sea. The lookouts scanning the horizon didn't see it. The radar operators tracking distant contacts didn't note it. The watch officer on the bridge checked the time, marked the ship's position on the chart, carried on. Below decks, in the cruiser's mess, men were eating breakfast, powdered eggs, toast, coffee, complaining about the food, the heat, the boredom of patrol duty. Someone had a letter from home. Someone else had a photo of a girl. Normal sounds, metal trays clattering, voices overlapping, the low hum of ventilation fans and distant machinery. None of them died that morning. All of them went about their day. Watch rotations, maintenance, drills. Some of them would die later. Kamikaze strikes hit other cruisers in other weeks. But not that morning. Not because of that Zero. This is what a sacrifice looks like from inside the moment. Routine maintained. Life continues. The threat you never saw passes by unseen, deflected by someone whose name you never learn. Whitaker's family received his posthumous letter in May. By then, the Okinawa campaign was ending. Victory was close. Germany had surrendered. Japan would follow. His father kept the letter in a drawer. His mother folded the flag. They told neighbors he died in combat. They did not have the details. The Navy did not provide them. In 1946, when the squadron's full records were declassified, a researcher noted the April 16th entry. noted the collision, noted Caldwell's report. The researcher was compiling a history of VF-83 for the Naval Historical Center. He wrote a footnote. Circumstances suggest deliberate ramming to prevent kamikaze attack on fleet unit. Then he moved on to the next entry. Historians would later debate the tactic of ramming. Some called it desperate, wasteful, contrary to doctrine. Others called it necessary, heroic, the only option in impossible circumstances. The debate missed the point. Whitaker didn't have time to debate. He had 12 seconds and a choice that wasn't really a choice. What should you feel about this? Anger, maybe, at a war that put young men in planes and told them to stop other young men in other planes by any means necessary. Sorrow for the losses. Whitaker, Yamada, the thousands of others. Respect for the commitment, however grim. Discomfort with the arithmetic that says one death prevents 400, all of it, none of it. The moment doesn't ask for your judgment, it simply was. Consider the sound of silence after impact. The Hellcat's engine stops, the Zero's engine stops, the wind continues, the ocean continues, the cruiser's engines continue, the war continues, everything continues except 2 lives. Caldwell returned to the Essex, filed his report, flew the next mission. He survived the war, went home, married, had children, worked as a flight instructor, died in 1989. In interviews late in life, he spoke about Okinawa rarely. Once, asked about Whitaker, he said, "He did what he thought he had to do. We all did." Then he changed the subject. The cruiser's captain never learned what happened, neither did the crew. The ship survived the war, participated in the occupation of Japan, was decommissioned in 1947, eventually scrapped. Her decklog from April 16th was preserved, scanned, digitized, available now to researchers. The entry for 0743 notes nothing unusual. This is how history preserves some moments and erases others. The big events get monuments, documentation, films. The small moments, the intercept that worked, the bomb that missed, the collision that prevented a collision, those slip through. They matter only to the people who lived them, and then those people die, and the moment becomes a footnote, or less than a footnote, a gap in the record. But the gap is where the story lives, the 12 seconds between decision and impact, the distance between should and must, the space where training ends and something else begins. You want to know what that something else is? So do I. Courage, maybe, duty, desperation, love, even love for the men on that cruiser who would never know his name. All words we use when we can't name the actual thing, which is simpler and harder. He saw what needed doing, and he did it. No speeches, no hesitation, no time for doubt or philosophy, or asking whether this was fair or right or necessary. Just the stick pushed forward, the dive begun, the distance closing. The ocean where they fell is empty now, no marker, no memorial. The coordinates, if you wanted to find them, are in the Kimberley's log. Approximately 27 degrees north, 128 degrees east. The water there is 400 fathoms deep, cold, dark, quiet. The debris sank decades ago, scattered across the seafloor. Metal corrodes, fabric dissolves, even bones eventually return to minerals. What remains is this: the cruiser sailed on. The war ended. Whitaker's name is carved on a wall at the Naval Academy Memorial in Annapolis, one line among thousands. Yamada's name, if it's preserved anywhere, is in a shrine in Japan, or in family records, or nowhere at all. And somewhere, in a file cabinet in a naval archive, Caldwell's 62-word report sits among thousands of other reports, most of them unread, all of them describing moments that seemed enormous at the time and now seem small, except they weren't small to the people who lived them. This is the aftersound, a cruiser's engines humming, men eating breakfast, watches changing. Normal sounds, life sounds, purchased by 12 seconds of impact. The question you're left with isn't, would you have done it? The question is, do you notice the silence where the explosion should have been? Do you hear the absence of alarms, the screams that didn't happen, the fires that didn't start? Probably not. You can't hear an absence. You can only feel it later when you learn what almost was. Whitaker felt it maybe in those 12 seconds. felt the lives he was keeping safe, the futures he was preserving. Or maybe he felt nothing except the physics of the dive, the tunnel vision of commitment, the simple clarity of one plane, one pilot, one choice. The sky over Okinawa that morning was blue and gray. The clouds moved east. The wind blew steady from the north. Below, the ocean rolled in its patient rhythm, indifferent to the small dramas playing out above its surface. And in a cockpit diving toward the sea, a young pilot held his course.